Hello. Welcome to another episode of our influencer series. Today we have an amazing guest and episode for you. We are going to be talking about how AI is only made effective with human connection. And we have with us Drew Nelson, a senior director at seventh level, where he is a seasoned sales leader and a coach at seventh level, training sales teams globally on the NEPQ methodology, which is a question-based, emotionally driven approach to sales that's built to thrive in this new AI-powered era. He has sold and led sales teams across multiple industry software services and even in the power sports space. You'll have to tell us more about that, Drew. So he knows firsthand how buyer behavior shifts depending on the environment. And today's he is here to break down how to blend AI with emotional intelligence to sell more persuasively than ever. Welcome, Drew. Where are we talking to you from today?
Yay, Thomas.
One of my favorite cities.
Yeah, this time of year, it's a good time to be here. I don't know, 6, 7 months out of the year, I question it, but that's all right.
Well, as long as you're a hockey player or a fan, it's all good.
That works. Yeah, yeah. We bleed green. We're a Minnesota Wild family. So
There you go. And the other good side of it is if you do go south in the winter, while they're all wearing coats, we can all jump in the water because our blood flows like molasses.
that's right. Yeah, that first 40-degree day, my kids are wearing shorts.
I'm with them. Well, that's great. Well, listen, we want to talk about AI and the human connection today and the new age of persuasive selling. So let's kick it off. Why do you believe that blending AI and the human connection is now a must-have rather than a nice-to-have?
Yeah, I think is we've all seen, and I'm sure everyone that's watching this is the victim of it too, that it's getting easier and easier to spot the AI messaging, right? We get flooded with texts and emails, and I mean, even customer support now is AI generated, where it's really missing that human personal touch. Right. So I think what AI can do is it can save us a ton of time, right? By gathering, compartmentalizing the data, the information. But what's missing and what people really do spot is the empathy, the human touch that we can come and to actually make that emotional connection with people while in that sales process.
Yeah, no, agreed. And I think that one of your early points, when AI first came out, none of us really could tell the difference because we weren't used to it yet. But now, it's an easy spot and we can actually see it pretty quickly. So I
Yeah,
agree with you. And that takes the
yeah,
shine off it, doesn't it?
it does.
Um,
Yeah.
so you've led teams and trained sellers across, many industries. What are some of the biggest shifts you've seen in how buyers respond to this new sales outreach since AI entered the picture?
Yeah, yeah, I think I think one, it's the spotting of it, right? So I think more so they're immune to some of the messaging, some of the outreach that's coming across. And what they get used to is really that pattern, right? And it used to be that it was a different pattern and the old sales methodologies kind of fit within that. I think what's now is the landscape is different, the buyer is different. So it takes a different approach when, breaking that pattern, breaking through the noise that they get in their inbox and their voicemail and all the other avenues that it's coming from today. I think we can talk about a little bit more. I think the phone is one of those that's harder to do with AI, where it can be even more effective today because we can actually have that level of connection. We can have a human on the other side of it, and it's not getting so lost in the spam of everything else.
That's interesting. That's interesting. So what you're saying is that the phone is having a resurgence with respect to its use because of AI?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the pickup rates and some of that are things that we have to navigate and figure out because yeah, people I think moved away from the phone because
Right.
all the other avenues also got easy, right? I can send 10,000 emails and do LinkedIn outreach at a button that's fully automated, and I'm getting some traction there. So I'm neglecting the ones that are harder, which one of those is picking up the phone, right? Because it's not the easy button as much as everything else is.
Right. No, I hear you. In addition to that, if we're making the connections on some of these other channels in the method that you mentioned by way of LinkedIn or emails or whatever it is, that phone call, especially if it can be used or combined with messaging like SMS or text or WhatsApp, can be made even warmer.
Yeah, yeah. And it's that omni-channel is something I've always been a stronger believer in. And
Right.
even more so now, right? That we're hitting them on LinkedIn, Facebook, email, then we're making that SMS and phone outreach. Well, if they've seen Thomas's name five, six different ways, like they're bound to respond.
One way or the other. But I would ask you this, with respect to the buyer, because you mentioned that the buyer has changed.
Mhm.
Can you elaborate on that? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, yeah. The buyer, I feel like more so than ever has more resistance than they have in the past. And I think it's partially because they're getting so much more messaging because there's the ability to hit the easy button and present them so many options, right? That they're more sensitive to that, and the sales resistance has gone up with that buyer.
Agreed, agreed. And the ability to actually connect with them is much different. It seems to me on that basis,
Mhm.
that the ideal customer profile for each industry is vastly different today than it was even just 2 years ago.
Oh, 100%.
And as you match some of these methodologies, including, seventh level and all the different things that you guys really focus on with that, you're going to get much better impact. Having
Yes.
said that, can you tell us a little bit more about what NEPQ represents and why it's important, especially for those who haven't heard of it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll give you just the very, very brief kind of history lesson of where it
Sure.
was came from, right? Which it was really founded in the new model of selling, I think is the best way to explain it. There's a lot of the approaches that have been out there for, I mean, 30, 40, 50 years, right? And those sales processes methodologies haven't changed. It's still I'm getting budget and authority and doing those things, right? That buyers have become sensitive or have created resistance to because they sense that pattern, right? So even from the very beginning, we focus on that connect. How do we connect in a way that's different? So the way that this was founded was actually our founder Jeremy Miner was going to school for psychology and had a child earlier than expected, needed to start making some money, got into sales. So he was out there knocking on doors, selling security systems, and found that there was a connection between with what he was learning in class, going to school for psychology, and what he would could apply to the sales arena that wasn't being taught by the company he was working for. So he said, "Hey, let me try this out," and then incorporating some of those strategies, he outsold every other person there, and decided, okay, psychology is awesome, but I can make a ton more money selling. So I'm going to go down this route and marry the two, and founded this what we call NEPQ, which stands for neuro emotional persuasion questioning. So neuro being the brain, right?
Mhm.
How do we use the psychology piece of it to pull out the emotions that an individual has to help persuade them, right? By asking the right questions and getting them to lead themselves to making a decision.
Interesting. So that said, and on that premise, what you've found is that emotion is more powerful than logic. And if that's true, how is that true, and how does that change how we use emotional selling to even get better success?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you think about anything you do, right? Like what drives you making that decision? Does it start with emotion or does it start with logic? I mean, something as simple as I feel like I'm thirsty, right? We don't start with, hey, I know my body needs water, so that's why I'm gonna drink water, right? It starts with even the emotional response of that. So people make decisions based on emotion. They justify it with logic. So by drawing out the emotions a person has through the sales process, and we have a very structured way where we move through kind of the current state of being, what their future could look like if we solved that problem, what the future looks like if we don't solve that problem, and truly getting to the personal emotional impact of how those decisions might affect them is how we help lead them towards making the decision that's going to solve their needs.
Right. And I couldn't agree with you more. I think emotion is where we always start, and logic tends to be where we end, because once we get them emotionally connected, then we can bring the logic and the rational thinking to simply support that and help them make that journey. That's a great point.
Yeah, I
So,
think many sellers that try to sell on logic, right? Like, hey, this makes sense because of XYZ feature benefit. Like, let me spew at you all the things our company does that's going to benefit you, which is all logic based. You haven't appealed to, well, how's this going to affect me personally, and how's this
mhm.
going to have the input, like have let me spend more time with my kids, or not work 80 hours a week so I can go be on the lake in Minnesota during the summer, right? So it's
Yeah,
getting true emotional
sure.
drive. Yeah.
Right, right. I couldn't agree with you more, and I would say that that's one of the biggest, most obvious mistakes that most salespeople make is they pull out the benefit sheet and they start going point by point, and then they don't understand why they're not getting any engagement or any interest.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's a great point. So if AI gets you in the door, how does this process, that being NAPQ, help you close the deal?
Yeah, yeah. So I think what AI can do is help us be very efficient on the front end, right? Whether that's in some of the messaging or, gathering some of the buyer persona, right? That used to take a lot of time and research, right? So we can come to that call much, much more prepared in a short period of time than we ever were before, right? Or it opens the door to get us our foot in, but like we said, so many salespeople are selling with that old methodology. They're
Right.
not leveraging the data they're getting from AI and then using that to make the emotional connection. So by gathering some of that, the profile points, the background of the person, like we can come in understanding a little bit more of how we can appeal to their emotions and how we can start to ask the right questions to be able to help drive them. One of the first things I learned, and I wish I would have learned this a long, long time ago, was every time I think I should make a statement, to turn that into a question. And that
Right.
that alone transformed my sales ability, my sales success, because that's when I started to appeal to the emotions and draw out, like, and I'm sure everyone could attest to this, like how do we persuade ourselves, do we understand something better when we say it ourselves or when someone tells us to do it?
100%. So you're engaging, you're bringing them into the conversation, you're getting them to think through what that hopefully you've developed by way of that emotional connection.
Absolutely.
Well, let's turn a little bit to what we would think about as being the tactical next steps. So you've engaged somebody potentially through AI or otherwise, and now you're into a conversation. What does a great connection stage opener sound like in today's world where there was a cold outreach to start with, and now you're coming in hopefully to a warm one, and a lot of it might have been auto scheduled or even AI enabled.
Yeah, yeah. What's really important in that connection stage is bringing down that sales resistance, right? So many of our buyers are accustomed to the same thing salespeople have been doing for 40 years, right? Take it as simple as if you walked into a retail store, right? Home Depot, mattress store, whatever it is, what does the salesperson usually say when you walk in? Like, hey, can I help you find something?
Right.
What is your response when they say, hey, what can I help you with?
I'm just looking.
100%, right? You may know exactly what you're looking for, and the person can tell you what aisle it's in and guide you to it, but you brush them off because that resistance to feeling like you're gonna be sold is already there,
Yeah.
right? So the same as maybe it's a in a Zoom call, right? It's the like, hey, how's it going over there? Like, what's the weather? How are you? All same pattern that they get from other salespeople that immediately raise the resistance. So I come into that call and you start asking me how I am, like, you don't really care how I am. You don't care about the weather in Minnesota. You know, I know you do, Thomas, because we're friends.
I do.
Yeah. But the salesperson I've never met, right? That's just is bringing that resistance up. So what we do is we teach how do you start to open the door to that emotional connection right away. So that's gonna, and we can get into the tonality piece of it, but I think at a base level, it's really how do we make it about them immediately, right? So it's, hey, I saw you booked some time on my calendar to talk about your marketing needs. Like, tell me what's going on that we can maybe help you with.
Right, right. And that sort of begs that next step where you're creating that problem awareness question and you're
Mhm.
starting to get beyond, the weather in Minnesota and now actually starting to talk about and probe with
Mhm.
respect to needs. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And then if they do, I mean, if they start to go down that route, like how often you just pause them to come back to you. So if they're starting to like, hey, you're like, well, how much does this cost? It's like I don't even know if we can help you yet. Like
Right,
help me understand what's going on with your marketing, with your, the
right,
current mattress you have. What makes you think you need something different?
right. Right.
Oh.
So you're probing at this stage to learn
Mhm.
what's sort of the, for lack of better language, what the pain points are and understand what you can relate it to. So you can, because when people come right out of the gate and say, what's the price, right? That's something we have to set expectations on by way of we don't know what the price is because we don't know yet
Ah,
what it is you really need and what you think you need. I'm here to help to make sure that that is a good fit and that that's what you need. So those are great points. Can you give us any other example and as to that type of question?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's go back to the retail example,
Okay,
right? And,
sure.
hey, what can I help you find, right? So, any of our automotive car or boat. I work with a number of boat dealerships, kind of the same concept, right? Whether we're selling mattresses, hardware, or $150,000 boats, kind of the same idea. Right? Instead of
Right.
the what can I help you with? Like it's even hey, are you just out looking around today? Well, what are you gonna, I mean, your response to that is, well, like, yeah, I am looking around. Oh, great. Like, what is it you're maybe looking for? Right? We've already approached that completely different because
Mhm.
we interrupted the pattern. So they didn't you're not expecting to get that question, right? You're
Mhm.
expecting that where can I point you in the right direction, or how can I help you? Instead, is are you out here just looking around? Well,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, right.
Yeah.
So
What do you like about this boat and what do you see yourself needing in yours?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and what kind of boat do you have today? Like what kind of experience are you looking for? Right? You start already tapping into the emotion side of it instead of being so just situational.
Yeah, and that leads to the next step with respect to helping the customer see their future in that boat and creating that solution side of it. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's the way that the so it goes from connection to situation. So that's
Right,
an understanding, right? Those are going to be more basic, but it's
right.
yeah, any what kind of boat do you drive today? Right? What are you currently doing for your search engine optimization, or how are you getting your leads through marketing currently? Right. So that's just understanding the baseline.
Right.
Then you can move into the what we call problem awareness, which is understanding like what's the problems with what they're doing today. And there may be some things that they really enjoy that are working extremely well, right? And we can recognize that. But there's always something they wish was better, right? Like, hey, it sounds like that's working really well for you today, but what had you maybe thinking you wanted something different?
Hmm.
It wasn't like an outcome you're getting or not getting with your current solution that would improve XYZ.
Right, right. And therein starts a real conversation
Hmm.
on that basis and understanding what it is they're already doing as compared to what they might be doing based upon whatever your solution is. Yes. Well, let me
Yes.
ask you a little bit of a trickier question. What do you do with respect to the objections that you might get along the way? And maybe it's, I don't need one this big by way of the boat, or, something with respect to the marketing side. Oh, we've got SEO in hand. We've been doing that for years. That's one of my favorite. But how do you deal with that? And how does NEPQ drive and help to solve that problem by comparison with anything else?
Yeah, yeah, we teach a lot of those strategies. We teach a
Mhm.
lot of objection kind of handling. The best way to do that is objection prevention, which we
Mm,
found through this process, right?
right,
You eliminate the objections before we get them with the way that we do we're framing, right? And what we do there is really help get them into a different future mindset. So if they come in with a cost-based outcome thinking, how do we transition them into a solution-based outcome thinking? By the way we even put them into frames or help them think about it differently.
okay. And with respect to that, and I don't think we've touched on this as much as yet, so maybe this is a good opportunity. How do we adjust our tonality and our behavior by way of the characteristics we're picking up from the buyer in order
Mhm.
to be more impactful and use emotional intelligence to help better connect?
Yeah, I think this is the biggest area of the human touch, and the most neglected area that most sales training companies don't touch on. I think we're one of the, like, if not the only in the world that focuses so heavily on tonality. Because any sales leader can, and even individual salespeople can attest to this. You've probably seen a group of salespeople that all sell the exact same thing, have the exact same script, right? Say the same stuff, but have wildly different results,
Right.
right? Because it all comes down to how they say it. And that's really where the human touch comes in. Because if I'm understanding, your needs, but I come across very robotic, like that doesn't seem like I actually care about what your needs are. But if I pause I slow down, right, and have these verbal pauses and cues, and I might be curious, or I might be confused. Now, if you're telling me your results are great, but something else isn't working, like that might be a more of a concern tone. Like, Thomas, you mentioned that, but help me understand why you're not doing something about it. So that's really that human connection. As we work with emotions, the tonality piece of it becomes so ultra important.
Right. And you want to try and match that so that you're being able to connect with them on their level, as opposed to, and this happens more times than either of us would ever like to see or acknowledge. We just blow by it and get into the rest of our spiel, whatever that is. We don't listen to it and we just move through it, and then we expect them to be there with us.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I've seen so many times we steamroll some of those emotions where it could be as simple as just allowing some silence to let someone process. Right. When they're really dealing with something, and we get into some, B2C decision making around, health and
Mhm.
fitness and y- getting support for other areas of your life. Like some of those are heavy, right? So even just sitting in the emotions and allowing that to kind of come out instead of moving forward and just pitching can have such a dramatic impact on the process.
And emotional intelligence is one of those innate skills that we develop, and it's a big part of your process, wherein we start to understand when the emotion of the customer is present and when it isn't. And
Hmm.
and and technically speaking, from the sales process by way of your system, if you're not hitting those emotional buttons and you're not getting emotional responses and they're not involved, then you're already losing the sale and you haven't done anything yet.
Absolutely.
Right. So
Yeah.
it's just, and that comes down to one thing and one thing only, and that's listening. And we don't do enough of that. And then asking the right questions to see if we can build up on that emotional context, right? Because one of the things that we can do, especially if we're not on top of it, is starting to sound robotic, as the AI might have that got them in the meeting in the first place, or got them into the sales process. So how do we overcome that, and how do we pick up on these emotional cues so that we can better communicate with these potential customers?
Yeah, yeah. I think that the you said the first one, which is listening.
Right,
Yeah, I think we need it by being a very effective listener, and taking in what they're saying.
right,
'Cause I'm a strong believer in having a script as an organization, but you can never sound scripted. So you
right.
kind of want to know where you're gonna go, but also know that you have to listen and be able to be nimble within it to ask the right questions at the right time that are drawing out that emotional response. But that's where the tonality plays into it too.
Right. And tonality and your emotional response builds trust.
Yeah, yeah, more so than and just like we can spot AI, like we can spot a disgenuine response.
Right, right. Because they're basically built on the same premise. And that
Yeah,
is, here's the information. How many do you want?
yeah, yeah, you got it. Or and I think we've all been trained in an example of this is objection handling.
Sure,
Right,
sure.
right. Any salesperson has been taught the feel, felt, found type of objection handling response,
Right.
where the buyer knows it's coming, right? I know you're gonna tell me you agree, you feel the same way. Others have found, right? Like I know where you're going, and my resistance is coming up again because
Yes.
it doesn't feel genuine.
Right. Right. So how do we help the sales teams um, perfect or at least get comfortable with that process.
Yeah. So I think it's understanding a few things, right? And obviously we work with teams to help them kind of build this into their methodology. But if I was going to give a few like simple takeaways, right, it's how do we um listen and ask questions that are genuine, right? Or the ultimate, like those are the ground kind of the ground pieces of our methodology. If we actively listen to what the buyer needs and realize that we're here to truly help them, right? What we always say is sales is not something we do to people, but something we do for people, right? And thinking of it that way, it changes that your mentality around it. That does help you to listen more that by asking the right questions to lead them towards fixing the problem they came to us for.
Right, right. And I would add to that, I think that like anything else, these are skills that we learn and we practice, 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 right? But the place not to practice within reason, because it's part of the process anyway, is with a customer, right? We don't want we don't want to practice on opportunities. We want to practice with role playing, right? And back in the day, that role playing was you and I, right, as a sales manager or a coach or trainer or all of the above, training and working with his or her team and doing that manual role playing and helping reps and teams get effective in communicating with customers. Today, we can do that real time, 24/7, using AI tools and AI systems, much like the ones you and I are working on, in order to help folks and sales teams really hone their skills. Further to that, it can engage them in a manner by which we can now score them and gamify it and do all sorts of wonderful things so they enjoy it and they want to get better at it and they can track their progress as they are, in fact, working with customers. Is that something that you think is an important part of the process?
Oh, 100%. I think, anyone that's been in sales for a number of years know that role plays have always been a big part of it.
Right,
At least my experience in the past is they were uncomfortable, right? Hey, let's
right.
all get in a room and Drew, your turn to sound like an idiot.
And Drew just loved that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Like I did sound like an idiot because I started sweating, my face got red, and I fumbled, right? But what's so cool about the AI models out there is I can do this in my own time, right? It takes the pressure off
yeah.
a little bit too. And not to mention the gamifying and the other pieces we can do around it to really make
Mhm.
reps look better. But they can go into that role play scenario without feeling judgment, without feeling like they're going to screw up because they're supposed to screw up, but they
That's
just don't
right.
have to do it in front of their peers or with their
That's right.
manager anymore.
That's
Yeah,
right. We all remember those days, and it helps them build confidence,
it
right?
does.
And get comfortable in their own skin with respect to the process that
Yeah.
we're.
'Cause what people talk about kind of making the first 10 calls of the day to get
I,
the marbles out. Well, now we don't have to do that on live prospects. Right? Before I jump on the phone for day, I can take a few reps with an AI bot and make those pretend calls to get in my groove so that on the first connect, I'm actually ready. I'm not thinking of how I'm gonna say it or what I'm gonna say because I just practice it 10 times.
Right. I think of the old sports comparative to what you just said, in that I don't actually get into the game until somebody smacks me, and could be soccer, football, hockey, doesn't matter. But once I take that first hit, I'm in the game. Until then,
Yeah.
I'm kind of just floating around, and hoping for whatever it is. But now that I take that hit or I give that, now I'm in the game, and now I'm mentally there. It's the same thing, right? We want to get mentally in the game, and we want to connect with people. So That's great. So if we talk a little bit more about tech enablement, how would you suggest people, and we've talked about a few things already, but how would you suggest people are best to start to enable and leverage AI into their sales workflows, and yet keep what they're doing human?
Hmm. Yeah, I think there's certain elements we can start to automate, right? And that is like there's messaging sequences and the information gathering and the data computing piece of it. Like let's let
Right.
AI continue to do that because there's so many efficiencies there. Right.
Hmm.
And I use it on a daily basis in creating messaging, right? Not that I don't read it and rephrase it because we don't want it to sound disingenuine, right? So we can help craft it and create it. So it's using all the tools that are there to get the messaging in a way that matches what our buyer might be looking for. And using there's tools out there to help understand the personas of the buyers and how we match the messaging. I think those are the huge levers of AI that we can almost do it better than a human can too, right? But it's when we make that live connection, we're utilizing that information, right? To not only get us in the door, but we're not disregarding what already happened to get us there by knowing and understanding what that buyer is looking for.
Right on, right on. And we're both familiar with, and we've seen it play out 1,000 times, I'm sure. And that is, people, sales reps, sales professionals, tend to have good days and bad days, like the rest of us. And in fact, some days we're more apt to write a great response and support the conversation we just had with a really great customer that might be a good opportunity and is really interested. And other days we don't bother, or we don't write as good an email, or we don't follow up at all, right? And the fact is that the biggest element to sales success is consistency, consistency, consistency. And when we do these things consistently and we build up on the methodology that we're using by that way, then in fact, we're going to get consistent results. When we don't, we're going to fall off and we're going to have ebbs and flows and we're going to have valleys and we're going to have hills, but mostly we're going to have valleys. So we want to stay out of the valleys and stay on top of those hills and do that. And that's where, and the reason I bring it up is because to your point, that's what AI does. So AI does what you talked about in terms of some of that initial inertia and creating those initial engagements. But what it also does is it helps us fill up the process as we move through it. So AI can write that email for you. It can recognize the persona by which the individual you were talking to reflected in the conversation and thereby write it in that tonality and in that manner so that we can now communicate with them effectively, not just in person, but in all of our responses accordingly. And AI doesn't miss anything where we do, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
we've
I
got
know.
another phone call going on and we're writing the email, we're putting it together, and we missed half of what we talked about in that call because we're now on to something else or thinking about something else. And so the email that we may have formulated, even though we may have gotten it out relatively quickly, probably not, but still, is not as strong as it might have been. AI doesn't miss those cues. It gets them, it pops it out. You have the opportunity to then review, take a look. Does it match? That looks great. Boom, out it goes. It's done. And you're on to the next one. Furthermore, and this is going to be something that all salespeople love to hear. And if they don't, they're not salespeople. And that is, it puts it in the CRM,
Right.
right? I'm sorry, but I don't care who you talk to. Salespeople do not put stuff in the CRM. They don't. You can
All the
offer
sales leaders just got really excited about it. Yeah.
You can offer a sales team $50 a head a day to do it. It still won't get done, right?
Mhm.
Because they're not administratively built, right? They're built to be communicators
Mhm.
and they're built to really have fun with working with people. So AI takes that out, allows them to do what they're good at, allows us to do what we're good at because we can help manage and see that in real time. Yes. So there's a lot of opportunity for that. So I guess my next question would be when we talk a lot about internal tension and external pressure with respect to the entire process, internal by way of the individual, external by way of the customers and the environment. Can you explain how an AI-driven outreach can impact that and why it matters?
Yeah, no, I think there's a few things there, and I think yeah, as you were talking about leveraging some of the tools, I think yeah, the big one of the big benefits I see is the memory piece of it too, right? Because I can't remember 10 calls ago what you said your needs were and how it was impacting your kid and everything else on the emotional side of it, right?
Right,
So
right.
it helps with that recall and me being able to bring that to the forefront.
Yeah,
Um, so I think it helps us collect the information, helps internally us to communicate better our business, which allows us as a company to forecast more accurately, right? So we're or connecting to those internal pressures that way, right? As a leader, I love it with my sales reps because I can fact check them, right? I'm not just trusting them off of, hey, you
right.
said this deal was going to close next week, but now I can see like you haven't talked to them for 2 weeks. Their sentiment in the last call was that they were disconnected and not very interested. So what's leading you believe you are forecasting this deal for May?
Right.
Right. Where it used to be all I had was the reps opinion to go off of,
Yes,
right? Like,
yes.
yeah, hey, like you said, like you're forecasting this deal, awesome. Like, let's go.
Right.
Uh, but then I saw internally, there's obviously a ton of benefits. Externally, as we're using this, like the buyers have a better experience as well because I'm not forgetting what they said 30 days ago, or I can go back and query the last meeting and, hey, what were the high level takeaways and what did I say I was going to do that I maybe didn't execute on yet so that I can make sure I complete that step. And then I'm going into this next call prepared. They're feeling heard. It's not that I'm disgenuine as a salesperson. I just don't always remember. And I didn't put it in the CRM because that's not something I do. But it helps me collect that information to provide truly a better experience for the buyer.
Yes.
Because they're feeling heard, they're feeling validated, they see that we're solving their problem and we're just we're doing all that with the human connection. We're leveraging a lot of the tools to make it more efficient and help our recall and help our cleanliness of the data along the way.
Nice. Nice. I want to come back to something you said because it adds another element. We'll continue on from there, but I don't want to miss this. And that is when you talked about the fact that it helps us stay on track with the customer and stay in tune with what they're doing. What it also does is it helps us as an organization see the good, the bad, and the ugly by way of what is being effective with customers in terms of what may not be. And that is to say, we think that this new feature or part of our solution is the greatest thing, since the invention of the water ski, but potentially the customers don't seem to care about it. And when we look, engage, and we use this data in the manner by which you just described, where we can go in and actually query all the meetings and the conversations that all our people have, we can see this isn't as impactful as we hoped, or this is crazy impactful. We need to have our people really speak to that where it's effective and where it makes sense with those customers. So there's more to it than just, that
Mhm.
meeting. There's also the analysis of all the data that you spoke to by way of coming in. Now, if you're not using AI, I hate to tell you this, but you don't have that data, right? Because the salespeople didn't put it in, right? So
Yeah,
that,
I would say it used to be our product roadmap was driven by the loudest voices, right? It was the salesperson that's losing deals because of a certain feature, but it's just that that one opinion or that one person that's actually giving you the feedback, right? Where you might be hearing a different story from your other 12 sales reps that they're getting from their customers. But those sales reps are one, not putting in the CRM, two, they're not cascading that to, in that product loop, right? So you're only hearing the loudest voices. You're not getting a true story of what the market is asking for.
You're not getting the full picture. Yeah.
Hmm.
No, I agree with you. On the basis of everything we're talking about and going into the year, a year and a half ago, AI was two different letters in the alphabet that none of us paid too much attention to. And now it's everything, right? It's amazing how quickly that's happening. But in addition to that, it's going to keep on happening, right? AI is not going anywhere. It's going to continue to evolve, and it seems to do that every morning by the time I get my coffee. So it's really important to stay on top of that. So having said that, and looking out through the rest of 2025 and going forward, what traits do you believe the top 1%
Hmm.
of salespeople are going to develop and or master that others won't?
Yeah, I think it's those that really truly pair AI with the human connection,
Right.
right? So what we found in before AI was the top 1% are the ones that were the most committed to mastery. And I think that shows up in both their sales skills, but also using the tools that they have at their disposal. Right. So we've kind of, as speaking of frames and mindsets of people, we found there are four types of salespeople. There's the wingers. Those are the ones that they just kind of show up, right? They get ChatGPT to write an email for them once in a while. They uh, read a book here and there, but they're the ones that you see the most inconsistency in their performance. Typically, they don't have a job very long, right? And they might bounce around a lot. There's those that are dabblers, right? So they invest a little bit more time in understanding some of the tools at their disposal. They might pick up a book here and there to learn about the new model of selling or take a course, but they don't full-heartedly put their focus into developing the skill. There's the third, and I think this is the trickiest of the bunch, are the know-it-alls. So
Uh-huh.
they're the ones that they've gotten to a pretty good level of success, right? They make a good, considerable amount of money, but they are closed-minded, right? They think they know it all. So they're the ones that aren't leveraging some of the tools, resources. They're not learning like they should and leveraging the things that they have at their disposal, and they plateau.
Yeah.
And we said they're going to become laggards because they don't buy into thinking about how they do their business more efficiently and using some of the AI tools. The fourth group is those that are committed to mastery. Those are the ones that are open-minded, that go above and beyond to leverage to learn what they can do different, how to leverage some of the AI and tools at their disposal, but also train just as consistently on their sales skills because they know that there's always room to grow and room to learn. And that's what really makes that top 1% are those that know that they can always get better. Like professional athletes are the same way. Yeah, if you think Steph Curry ever thinks he doesn't need to practice shooting free throws anymore, right? Uh,
Mhm.
he still, like every day, shoots whatever, right? He never stops getting better, and you'll find that concurrent thread across, professional athletes as well.
Right. So the nice thing about all of what you've described is that it becomes easier to differentiate and recognize using AI. And in fact, it becomes easier to hone those skills and to get even better at what you're doing with AI as a tool. On a percentage basis, do you see AI being used in that context today, effectively?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think the top 1% are leveraging it to, to do the role plays, to collect the information, to support their outreach. So that top 1%, I would say, is leveraging AI more than any other of those groups because they see it as a way to bring them closer to mastery.
Yes, I would agree. I would add to that that it's not always just an issue with respect to the sales professionals, in that the organizations they work with may not have bought into the whole opportunity with respect to the proper use of AI either, and therefore they don't have these tools. And so
Hmm.
they decide that, they'll just work with what they've got. Well, that's the opportunity, and generally it's that 1%, isn't it? That take the initiative and go out and do it anyway, right?
Yeah,
And
typically you'll find the wingers aren't the one that are paying for a subscription to a tool, right? It's those that are committed to mastery that see, okay, if I can invest $100 a month and or something, a nominal amount, but if I can sell three times more, well, the ROI far outweighs the investment, and that's what's gonna. And even if I'm not commission based, which most sales people are, but say I wasn't, right? That's how I'm going to outshine my peers, right? I'm going to be the first for the next promotion because I'm mastering and figuring out how to leverage some of these tools, even if my organization isn't supporting it.
right. And what happens is when the organization doesn't recognize that, and these people do get better and better, what do? They leave
Hmm.
and they become the 1% somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just as important for the underlying organization to recognize the opportunity as it is for the sales reps. It's a combination. But let me ask you this. For somebody listening today, whether they be an account executive or an SDR or a BDR or inside sales in one form or another, or a sales leader, what one NEPQ principle or question could they try this week to instantly improve the conversations they're having?
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say it's as simple as turning that next statement you want to make into a question. Right. It's because it's going to look different in each industry or each type of sales, whether you're B2C or B2B. Right. But I would say that the biggest bang for your buck is going to be next time you're thinking about a statement, turn it into a question.
Nice. Nice. And our theme today, if we can call it that, was the marriage between AI and sales, and how the combination of being human and using emotional intelligence was the difference. Is that fair? So
Hmm.
do you think that there are other areas that we can add to by way of our conversation in terms of how AI can even improve our emotional intelligence?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I think what AI can also do is help us to recognize that the tonality that we're using and how to help us improve the effectiveness of that. It can help us understand the buyer and how to match their emotions and what they need. So I think, yeah, there's a degree of our own emotional intelligence we need to have, right? But what I think AI can do is help us to see some of those blind spots and to really help us hone our craft by understanding ourselves and understanding our buyer in a different way.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think buyers will continue to change, and they can continue to access information and data far and away outside and more than we can ever provide. So our goal isn't to give them all the data. Our goal is to guide them and
Hmm.
help leverage their emotional attachment to what's important for them in order to make great decisions. And that's really what it's all about. But what I will say, and I get asked this all the time, and you must too, and especially when you're getting pushback from sales teams on why they should use AI. I often hear, well, AI is here to replace us. Why would I want to support that initiative? And so how do you answer that just out of curiosity, Drew?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because it can't replace that human connection,
Right,
right? So I think
right.
as salespeople, as sales leaders, it can't replace us, but the top 1% are going to be the ones that learn how to master it, how to hone it, to hone their craft, to make them better and more efficient.
Yeah, yeah, no, I would agree, and I tell everybody that the same thing. AI isn't going to replace salespeople. AI is going to replace salespeople who don't use AI. I
You
mean, it
nailed it.
really is
Yeah.
that simple. We can spend 10 or 15 years, or as Malcolm Gladwell says, 10 years to learn anything, to master tonality, to master our ability to match the conversation with the nature of the personality of the customer we're talking to. We can do that, or we can have AI do it now, every time, all the
Mhm.
time, and help fill in the blanks and become a master much more quickly than we ever could. I mean, on average, how many customers does a sales rep speak to a day?
Oh, I mean, it depends on the industry, but it's got to be a big number. Yeah.
It's not. And that's the problem, right? So the problem is in most industries, right, unless they have a lot of walkthrough on the retail level, they don't speak to anywhere near enough customers because they spend all of their time in the drudgery, the
Mm,
lead generation, the acquisition, the emails and whatever
sure.
process they may be using, and not enough time speaking to customers. What if you could speak to double or triple the amount of customers every day, use these systems and processes by way of the seventh level training with NEPQ process, and really get impact? But instead of talking to two customers, you talk to 10. What do you think that impact would be?
Yeah. Yeah. It's easy to do the math there. Yeah.
Right? It's not tough. So, I leave it with that, but I do want to say that I think that we've really spoken to the human elements. And I think that's what's important. That's never going away. In fact, it's only going to get more and more important. And using systems like NEPQ to recognize and hone those skills against the tonality that you're recognizing is an enormous step in the right direction.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
Drew, how does everybody reach you?
Yeah. You can head to our website, which is seventhlevel.com, or you can reach out to me as well, which is drew.n at seventhlevel.com.
Right. Now we all know you're going to be on the lake pretty quick. So do you have your mobile with you?
You got it. Absolutely. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Drew. And this was a
Yeah.
wonderful conversation. I look forward to more.
Oh, I enjoyed it. Thanks a lot, Thomas.
Thank you, Drew. And bye-bye, everybody. Thank you for attending this session. And this session will live in infamy. You will see it on YouTube and in a number of other places. And you can reach out to us and preferably Drew with all the questions you have by way of the seventh level NEPQ sales process that all your teams should be using today. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.